Saw this morning that just happened this morning that Rebbe Zohar Zecher Tzaddik Levacha was nifta. Uri, one of his early points of contact, he's a man who made history. He changed the face of Eretz Yisrael, and for many, many people outside of Eretz Yisrael, globally. He was a star in the theater, and when he turned and became Shemet Torah Mitzvahs, a Ben Torah, a true Ben Torah, that immersed himself in learning in Habotzes Torah, he wrote a new page in the history of Eretz Yisrael. He was a friend. One of his early points of contact was Nasa V'Nishma, founded by Ohr Somayach in Tel Aviv. And for many years, he was a neighbor. Strange, but if you look at the Kaddish, it doesn't seem on the surface to have any context. The content doesn't seem to have a context with Avelis. And it has been said by Gedolei Chassidus that every Jew, every neshama, is a reflector, like you have on the side of a road that has narrow shoulders. And when that reflector has been removed, then one might think that there's a diminution, a reduction of the Gilui, the revelation of Elokus, of godliness in the Bria. And so our davening is to replenish that which seems to have been removed. Peculiarity of Avelos is we're dedicating these words, this Sicha L'ilui Nishmosai. But strange that the first day, Aninus, the Oval refrains from doing mitzvahs. The whole Avelis, he does acrobatics halachically to generate more mitzvahs. He takes the maftir, aliyahs, every bracha he can take, should be l'ilui nishmosai. Not to do mitzvahs? My understanding of that has been that before an oval can enter into Avelus with integrity, he has to not just sympathize, he has to empathize with the nifta. How can a chai empathize with a nifta? Not doing mitzvahs. The refraining from doing mitzvahs is a moment of truth, of tasting a tam of misa. And then there can be an integrity in going forward. So the Ilui Nishmosai shall man who really changed the history of Eretz Yisrael in the world. Reburi Zohar. Meshech Chochmah notes that Posek in Yisroi, Kabbalas HaTorah, Vayan kol ha'om yachtov. People answered all together. They were on the same page. Vayomru, kol asher diber Hashem nasa. Everything that the Rebbeinu Shalom has instructed us, we will do. Vayoshav Moshe es divrei oram el Hashem. Moshe, the Rebbeinu Shalom heard it, but Moshe, as the Eved Nemon, brings back the response. That's in Yisroi. In Mishpotim, we have V'yoma kol hadvorim asher diber Hashem nasa. Will do. Doesn't say nishma, it just says nasa. It's called divrei Hashem v'yashkem v'boker v'yiven mizbeach. And it continues, and v'yikach sefer abis v'yikach ba'ozen ha'yom v'yomru kol asher diber Hashem nasa v'nishma. Over here it says Nasa v'nishma. But if Nasa v'nishma, the first time round, was a declaration of being makabel Torah, then this is again. But here it says Nasa v'nishma. The first time it said Nasa. But we have a concept that there are times in Jewish history where we are deprived of access to the Beis Mikdash, to the ideal. Most of our history we're going to be in Golus. I would think that that is one of the reasons that Matan Torah was, in fact, in a midbar, outside Eretz Yisrael. That it would, Meshech Chochmah talks about that elsewhere, that it establishes the reality that Klal Yisrael, there is no per se Kedusha other than that which is connected to the history of Klal Yisrael. This Mokum was the Mokum of the Akedah. This Mokum was the Mokum where it wouldn't be a continuing Kedusha. The event per se is a continuing, extended Kedusha, but because it's rooted in Klal Yisrael's history. Medrash, again, it's the Meshech Chochmah that calls attention to the Medrash. He says that Eile Torah Shemayim Ba'oretz B'hi Borom. B'hi Borom is Oisius Avrom, says the Medrash. B'Avrom. B'yom Asois Hashem Elokim Eretz V'Shemayim. Starts out Shemayim Ba'oretz and switches to Eretz V'Shemayim. Because at the time of Avram, as he was coming onto the scene, there were still people roaming the earth that knew somebody who knew somebody who knew. Noach, who knew Adam that could yet testify to the historical fact of the reality of creation, yesh me'ayin, creatio ex nihilo. By the time Avram comes on the scene, is now going to have to be reconstructed. Me'eretz l'shamayim. Avram is going to have to, as the Medrash in Lech Lecho says, yesh odon l'bira zu. It's too well organized, too well appointed. All of the cause and effect. Could it be otherwise? But it's not the way we think. And if that's the way we think, everywhere else, we're in fact being dishonest if we veer off the rails just when it's comfortable for us and to say, okay, but here there's no cause and effect. Beis Elokim, the Mabit, writes that if you look at the Luchos, the Bein Odom Lechavero and the Bein Odom Lamokom, Bein Odom Lamokom is on the right side, there are much less words in the Bein Odom Lechavero. So they had to be, says the Mabit, much larger lettering, because the letters held the words. The words are the letters, and they held the tablets, they held the luchos, so that there should be a balance. It would be necessary that there would be much larger lettering in the Bein Odom Lechavero. And that resulted, says in an emphasis that the weak failing of Klal Yisrael in history would too often be Bein Odom Lechavero. And because this was Kiddush Levana Oisius, it was now being emphasized. It would be a reinforcement for those Oisius. Perhaps we might add that it also served as a kind of neon sign flashing throughout history. When a potential Bal Tshuva or a ger looks at the Jewish people, what's he going to look at first? The Bein Odom Lechavero. How do these people function, live as a community, as families? And that will be a magnet to say, there's something special here. There's something different here. Let's check this out. So only the third time in Parshas Mishpatim, Vayikach Sefer HaBris Vayikra Ba'oznei Ha'om Vayomer Kol Asher Diber Hashem Na'aseh V'nishma. Because there'll be times in history where we won't have access to that Achdus. What do we have? We have learning. Zeis Teiras Ha'olah. We can have the learning If we have the Beis Mikdash, that's what we want. That's what we strive for. In Be'ita Achishena. Either we merit it or we don't. But when it's delayed, then in fact, Zeis Torah Sa'ila. We have the limud of the Torah. So, Erev Shavuos, everybody has his shlichus. We have many sources that indicate that the neshama of somebody who has touched so many other neshamas, it's post facto a raya to us that it was a neshama with tzidkis, with an extraordinary level of reaching both ways. So we stand now before Kabbalas HaTorah, each one of us. And we're asking, V'sein chelkeinu, our chelek in Torah. That should be the chelek that was our shlichus, is our shlichus, that in the ongoing jigsaw, kaleidoscope of history, each piece in the jiggling comes to a certain place, moment, where it contributes to everything else falling into place. Remove one piece, and there's chaos. Another thought of Shavuos is that we have psukim in Yecheskel that refer to Pesach as Shavuos. Some say it's because you begin the counting. Some say it's because there was a shvur, a commitment, like swearing, Klal Yisrael, not to abandon the Torah, and the Rebbeinu Shalom not to abandon Klal Yisrael. And part of that idea is rooted, some sefer I believe it is, that makes the point that Masechta Shavuos has 49 dapim. Building, the Bali Musa teach us this period when, as it's taught by the Akedah, by the Ibn Ezra, when we exit Mitzrayim, we're not yet ready to receive the Torah. But there was, in that diyun about making a shechayonu for Sfiras HaOmer, that the Isarusa Deli, the arousal from above, that happened on Pesach is now being re-earned and reclaimed as we climb the ladder to be the appropriate recipient of the Torah. So it is really both. It's the weeks of counting, but it's also the oath of the mutual obligation. And for all of the families of the world, Lo Yedom, the Rebbeinu Shalom didn't give this opportunity. So don't they have a claim? So that has been spoken about here by Yerbeim, that in a very real sense, they had their opportunity, they forfeited it when they didn't want to take Torah. One more point that the Meshech Chochmah makes, that he quotes that, no, I'm sorry, it's the Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer makes the point that early on, there was a machlekes between Cain and Abel already at that generation, whether everything was just an infinite regression going backwards. The Olam was Kadmon. Cain held that. And Abel held that there's a difference between the generations, and that's why he brings Meibcheres Seinen V'chel Behen. And reads the Chassam Sofer V'chala Behem. 2 generations. If you hold that there's intentionality and teleology, that everything is created and directed, then in fact it's not an infinite regression going backwards. What's so special about Klal Yisrael's recognition? And why, in fact, if that's the moment of Bikurim, that's the moment of, says the Chassam Sofer, it's not enough to eat cheese, because then you took off the valuable part and you left the liquid which is worthless. You have to drink milk, because Torah was given to all of Klal Yisrael. And milk, it's all mixed together. It's not shaykh that there was once an achsanya for Torah, that it shouldn't come back. A great-great-great-great-grandmother that cried by lichtbenching that her progeny should remain Torah-dike Jews. This moment, why was Hevel culpable? Because he delayed. Cain took the initiative. Why did Cain take the initiative? Because if it doesn't obligate you, why not take the initiative? What difference does it make? But Hevel brings me B'cheres Senei, and the Porah and the Cholov the Chalav are two different Deiros. Hashem Yitain that the Mesiras Nefesh of as we have quoted in the past, the Latin term is the cholent is gerotten in Gast. The cholent is as good as the people who are eating the cholent. The Talmidim in this room, contrary to so much dis and misinformation, no empty beds here. There haven't been all the way through. And there are many on their way. Hashem Yitain that Mesiras Nefesh of the people sitting in this Beis Medrash, their sense of emes being paramount, and it trumps all the dis and misinformation that abounds. Hashem Yitain that we were 2 days ago in Shari Tzedek with Reb Shlomi. Reb Shlomi bought a coffee while we were trying to navigate the maze. The fellow standing behind the coffee counter has a Hersher Badatz without a kippah. And Shlomi buys a coffee and he's about to make a bracha. And he whips out a kippah and puts it on. Wait a minute, I want to say Amen. Hashem Yitain that in the schus of everybody here and all those waiting to come, that we should be'emes all be on the same page. Should be the Ilui Nishmas Rebui Zohar, and in the schus of the merging of Olam, Shona, V'nefesh, place, time, and people. This place, the improbability of this Beis Medrash coming together with the light and the air digging down. But that's what it's all about. Digging down, not just superficially glancing at where we are and where we have to be. Hashem Yitain that it should be a emes Kabbalah Torah for us and for Klal Yisrael.